just told the Rav, a cold night, with the Torah, need to ask everybody, if everyone has a cell phone, to turn off the cell phone. Most people are still Shabbosdik, besides the video cameras. So, it's a gewaltige COVID, for all the Lemdei Torah, to ask Aharon, Rav Kahn, Shlita. Is there any other form? I just brought the Gemara. Oh, you have that, yeah.
I took this farm with me. Special schus to be in this space medrash. I'm not sure I can give this oilam anything that they don't already know. But we'll try. Is as I don't fangen mit dem Rambam. Hilchos Nizirus Perek Gimel, Halacha Yud Aleph to Halacha Tezayit. Rambam begins, and the kapitel in Ganzen, the whole Perek, is about the Shiur Zman of Nizirus. It's starting from the Aleph base, Nizirus Shloshim Yoim B'chulu. And from Me'inyan Le'inyan, he starts talking about Nazir Olam. And after Nazir Olam, he gets to Nazir Shimshon. It's important that Dafka in this kapitel, if I would have started, if I was writing Hilchos Nazir, so I would have started by saying there are 3 kinds of Nazir, 4 kinds of Nazir, whatever it is. There's a Nazir, regular Nazir. There's a Nazir Olam. There's a Nazir Shimshon. A kama v'kama inyonim and halachas that are negayat to a Nazir Shimshon that are not just an inyan of the Zman and the Shiur, that it's la'olam. A Nazir is also b'tumah with tamil l'meisim, and Shimshon, whatever they had from the psukim, but Nazir Shimshon is not only is he not also the tamil l'meisim, but there's nothing there. He can be metamil l'meisim. It's not a b'diavad, it's a lechatchila. Chotish tziton mit meisim. Also halachas of taglachas can never be megaleach saroi. But Dafka the Rambam decided to put Nazir Shimshon in a box called the Shiur Zman of Nazir. Amloi dovahu. Zok the Rambam halacha Yud Aleph mishama hareini Nazir la'olam, hareini Nazir kol yemei chayai, harei Nazir la'olam. V'im Oma hareini Nazir 1000 shana, harei Nazir l'zman kotzov. Even though it's not shayach. That's how the Rambam begins Halacha Yud Aleph, the din of Nazir Olam. Uma bein Nazir Olam leNazir l'zman kotzuv. Sagt der Rambam in Halacha Yud Beis she'anazir l'zman osu legaleach ad soif yemei neziroi. Shenemar kol yemei neder nizroi ta'ar lo ya'aver al roshoi ad melois hayomim. Nazir Olam mehichbid saroi mekel betar mishnei masa chodesh ad shnei masa chodesh. This, of course, is the Nazirus of Avshalom. Avshalom was a Nazir Olam, Shmuel also, but Avshalom lo yoyo ish, says the Pasuk Yofeh b'chol Yisrael lahalil mi'oid mikaf ragloi vad kodkodoi lo yoyo v'imum. It was one of the unique aspects of Avshalom that he was extraordinarily beautiful, extraordinarily handsome, from the top to the bottom. Uvegalcha yisroishay, v'hoya miketz yomim liyomim, asher yigaleach ki chovid olav, v'gilchay v'shokal asar roishay masayim shkolim be'even hamelach. So it's extraordinary weight, but his taltalim shechoilos that he had, he used to cut them miketz yomim liyomim. Yomim liyomim means mishana lishana. Says the Rambam, this because Avshalom was a Nazir Olam. Those are the Rambam. The Nazir Olam im hichbit saroi mekel betar mishnei masa chodesh ad shnei masa chodesh umevi korbonoi sholosh behemois k'sheyegaleach. And then he goes weiter. Shenema vahi miketz yomim liyomim v'chulu, the pasuk that I just read to you. V'Avshalom Nazir Olam haya. V'dova zeh halacha hi mipi hakabola. V'Nazir Olam shenitma Hareze mevi korban tuma umegaleach taglachas tuma k'may nozer lizman kotzuf. So even though there's this inyan of megaleach only mishana l'shana, but if he's nitma, he has the regular halachas of nozer as well. Halacha Yud Gimel sagt Shimshin lo hoya nozir gomo. Sharei lo nodar benozir. Elo hamaloch hifrisho min hatuma. Meide gezach. So the Rambam is not telling you that the Nazirus of Shimshin starts differently. Its makor is from the Malach. He says, Lo hoya nozir gomo, sharei lo nodar benozir. The Ketzad hoya dinoi, hoya osu biyayin, v'osu b'taglachas, umutar lehitame lemesim. V'dovo zeh halocha mipi HaKabbalah. The same lotion that he used by Nozir Olam, he uses it now by Nogeya Nozir Shimshin. The dinim are very different, but the Rambam brings it back to back. It's very interesting. Lefikach, mi sha'ama hareini Nozir, kishimshin. Hareze Nozir min hataglachas umin hayayin lo'olam. Ve'enoi megaleach kol shnei masa chodesh kisha'ar nezirei olam. What does it mean, kisha'ar nezirei olam? So this is a very suspicious expression, kisha'ar nezirei olam. Because in the lomdus of it, one would wonder, but he's not a Nazir olam at all. His halacha happens to be that it's forever, because Azayah is avegeshtot the malach. Aber mehechet that it's a sug Nazir olam. The Brisker Rav talks about it, we'll see in a minute.
Isn't there a Nazir olam and a Nazir le'olam?
The Rambam says, in his lashon here, he says, "Is a Nazir min hataglachas umin hayayin le'olam," and the einoi megaleach kol shnei masa chodesh kisha'ar nezirei olam. Nazir olam. It's a title. Umutar lehitame lemeisim. V'im amar lo niskavanti elo leish acher sheshmo Shimshin einoi Nazir. Umishanada Nazir kishimshin einoi yochel lishoel al nidroi shenezirus Shimshin le'olam haisa. So einoi yochel lishoel al nidroi, you know, when you can't be shoel, could be two mahalchim, two ideas going on here. Number one, that the chayme haneder, the chayme hadover, does not lend itself to she'ela. The other one is that the neder itself doesn't lend itself to she'ela because of the lashon haneder. Meaning, in other words, if the neder is la'olam, so says the malon is shalf and she'ela, because right back he's going to be vital la'olam. We'll see about that also. Now, b'naigeya some of these inyonim is tilim shel sfarim. To give a shiur on Nozir Shimshin in whatever 3/4 of an hour is maybe use the word absurd. But Tasidas, you know, we're not coming back every week for another 6 weeks, so we'll try our best. The Rambam says noch two halachas. He says, "Ha'im ha'reini k'shimshin k'ben manoyach k'bal delila k'misha akadal seis aza k'misha nakhu plishtim es einov." In other words, even though there could be another Delilah with another husband of Delilah, or somebody who broke the doors of Azza in the latest campaign, Abelamaisa meant Shimshin, and he becomes a Nazir Shimshin. Shmuel Ramasi, Nazir Olam Haya. What's interesting is, here also, Vasepis Mitamol, as Mahatach, Nazir Olam earlier, and he told us the dinim of Nazir Olam, and he tells us Nazir Olam from whom? From Avshalom. Dort not the Gedaf gleich sagen, and also Shmuel was a Nazir Olam.
It wasn't Menadeh. It wasn't his nether.
Yeah,
That's the similarity.
it wasn't his nether. Shmuel Ramasi Nazir Olam Haya Lefika Chaima Hareini Kishmuel HaRamasi, Keben Chana, Keben Elkana, Kmisha Shosef Esaga Begilgol, the Kayetze Be'elu, Hareze Nazir Olam. Vein Oimrim Shem Elish Acher Shemaisav Ka'ela in this Kaveh. Why the Rambam doesn't say the same thing about Avshalom? There's lots of things that you could talk about Avshalom that are doime, but weiß ich nicht. Aber es ist sehr interessant that Shmuel HaRamasi Nazir Olam Haya. The Rambam doesn't talk about how Shmuel became a Nazir. But one thing is very, very clear, that the Rambam does not learn that it's like Shimshon. In other words, basically the Rambam by Shimshon says beferish what's the uniqueness of Shimshon. He doesn't say this by Nazir Olam. Nazir Olam is the same Nazir, except because he's Mekel B'tar, so there's this prat. And he says, Dovo zeh halacha mipi Kabbalah. But the Nazirus of Avshalom and the Nazirus of Shmuel is not al pi Kabbalah. It's not that there's a sug Nazirus of Nazir Olam that's bezunda from the regular Nazirus, and it's the whole sug is halacha l'Moshe Sinai. That's only by Nazir Shimshon, and maybe not even. So there's this tremendous chakira that everybody has. Is Nazir Shimshon a completely different kind of Nazirus Bechlal? And Abadig it is because of Gzeres HaKosav and halacha l'Moshe Sinai only. And then Afkaminas halacha l'Moshe Sinai, maybe there's no Malchus. Rabbi Lemaisa, Chazayin Cheskel talks about it, Ba'arichus. Or is it Mamash a Sug Nazirus, within all the Sug, there's only one Sug Nazirus. But based on the halacha l'Moshe Sinai, its pratim are different. The Brisker Rav in Nazir Davdalit Amid Aleph. By the way, I just want to point out my heter to talk about Nazir Shimshon, which Beikar is in Seches Nazir, because on Daf Yutes Amid Beis we have Nazir Shimshon in the Dorim. Ma bei Nazir Olam the Nazir Shimshon hichbit b'sarei in a mekel. Then he writes, the Rambam writes in Perek Gimel Halacha Yedalid, the Fikach mi shama areini Nazir k'Shimshon arei Nazir min hataglachas min hayayin la'olam. He quotes the whole Rambam. He writes umashma the Zed the Nazir Shimshon ein a mekel echad liyud beis chodesh shul chidush ha'torah b'Nazir Shimshon. The Shani Bazem Mishal Nazir Olam. The Choyla Hari Nazir Shimshon Nazir Olam Beis Minei Nazirus Chalukah Shedineim Chalukim. Umashayach the Nazir Shimshon Liyez Ba'adin Shemekel B'Tal. Me'aram Mashma Dehu Chidush Din B'Nazir Shimshon. He's asking this question that my logic, my normal assumption would be that Nazir Shimshon is radically different from Nazirus in general, and Nazir Olam is a Sug Nazirus. So he says, what is he bringing in? He writes this Loshen in Halacha Yedalid, the Fikach Misha'oma Hareini Nazir K'Shimshon Harei Ze Nazir Min HaTaglachas Min HaYayin La'olam Ve'enoi Megaleach Kol Yud Beis Chodesh K'Sha'al Nazirei Olam. The Brisker Rav is asking, what's your Havamina? Like, why should you think that he should be Megaleach Kisha? Because, Balabos would say, because it's heavy and it's hard. And we would have thought that he has to cut his hair, so that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave him this heter. So Kamash Malon, that he doesn't have this heter, but the Brisker Rav Shtetzach is not going to have that perspective. He wants to know, why does the Rambam bring in that he's different than other Nazirei Olam, and he's not a Nazir Olam at all? So he wants to say that he is. This is Mizetman Funda. Zok the Brisker Rav like this: V'nira al pi mashe kosav Rambam shah v'zel l'shoyna. U'ma bei Nazir Olam l'Nazir l'zman kotzuv. That's Halacha Yud Beis. We just read it. Right? So he says Sha'Nazir l'zman also l'galeach ad soif yemei Nazirei. She'nema kol yemei Nazirei ta'al lo yavar al v's'alosha ad melois hayomin. Nazir Olam im hich b'tzarei mekel b'tal u'mevi korbanos gimel behemos sheyigaleach k'sheyigaleach. Umashma, says the Brisker Rav, the shitosai the achiluk shebei Nazir Olam l'Nazir stam hu loy be'etzem kabbalas hanazirus. The Nazir Olam nazirus acheres hi legamri. We don't say that. No. Ela desvirolei the kol nazirus she'ein zmana kotzu v'chaloisu le'olam v'zeh nemra halacha the Nazir Olam. In other words, it's the same Nazirus as any other Nazirus. The din is that if it turns out that the Nazirus doesn't have a Zman, there's no Kodesh Yiyah, Stam Nazirus Shloshim Yoim v'chule, or any Zman that he's Maktiv. That's the difference if he says Kol Yemei Chayai, or he says, Mei Shona, and so on and so forth. If he makes it such that the Nazirus is La'olam, then the halacha turns out that he's Mekel B'tar Kol Shona v'Shona. But it's just a taitzah of the kind of zman that was given to a regular Nazirus. As says Dr. Brisker Rav.
Where's the mashmos? He says that it's mashma. What lashon is mashma like that?
because I guess when you say ma bein, it's mashma that they have a tzad hashava. That's the way the Brisker Rav is seeing this. And it also, I would add, I guess he assumes that also, the whole Perek. You don't start, as I said at the very beginning, you don't start about Nazir Olam, and certainly not about Nazir Shimshon, with that there's Naziris Shloshim Yom. You're talking about a Shiur Zman in a regular Naziris, then you list all the kind of Naziris and that have Shinuyim, the Shiur Zman, it makes sense. But if it's an entirely an Andal Zach, it's just coincidentally that it happens to be a different Zman, why are you bringing it in here? And me, if it was up to me, I would bring it in Perek Aleph of Hilchos Nazir right at the beginning.
The Pasha would say, I would say, Nazir Shimshon's Hakar Nazir Olam. Except there's a heter, he has a heter for Tumah. That's what I would say, Pasha.
Well, I don't know if it's so Pasha. But anyhow, the Brisker Rav writes there for as follows. Vinei balochit gim kosher Shimshon lohoya Nazir gomo. Shal lo yinoda benazir el hamalach ifrishay min atuma. V'keitzer hoya dinoi. Hoya also b'yaynu b'os v'taglachas mutal litamil emeisim. Umashma midvorav. The Nesirus Shimshon eina min Nesirus acheres legamri. Shal kosav Shimshon lohoya Nazir gomo. Mishum shohoya mutal litamil emeisim. V'lohoya olav kol dina Nesirus. Harei the Nazirus Shimshon domi l'shal Nazirus ela d'lehoisa Nazirus gemula. Everything is how you look at something. But the Brisker Rav is looking at these words and he's saying that when he says it's not Nazirus gemura, he should have said it's Nazirus eino Nazirus, or it's a Nazirus acheres. Or as some wanted to say, in fact, I don't know if I even have it here, but the Marit in Chelak Aleph Siman Chof. So the Marit has an idea. He rejects it, but he wrote to this Rav, this very chashuv Rav, and the Rav suggested that Nazirus Shimshon is going. It's a neder ba'alma. You're answering A and you're answering B and you're not answering C, and it turns out, and that you look just like a Nazir Shimshon, but it's not a Nazirus at all. So such a havamina. Mashetofis katali katam. Nazirus Shimshon eino ela mitam neder lo nischaver etzli klal. The Marit knocks it down. Choda dimishum she'eino betuma k'gdei Nazirus amrinon eino yelo neder im kein boima hareini nazir min achatzanim min azagim amana she'agaleach or amana she'tamil emeisim yiyosu behem mitam neder lo mitam Nazirus. V'chi heichid amrinon hosam kol dikduke Nazirus olav afal pi shepirish v'omar almanas af Kahn. Noima kol dikduke Nazirus olav afal pi she'omar k'shimshon u'ma tam l'chalek v'oi de kol she'oim b'bloshin Nazirus al kol chagiat yochel oim shul neder afilu im lo hoisa kavanos lekach. And he speaks later and he says this word, that it doesn't make a difference. But if he would have said, for example, mufreshani mincha, like a person would say, hareini nazira mimcha, that's already a neder, because it's not really saying hareini nazir, it means I'm going to be also to you. So that's already a neder, v'chulei v'chulei. But if a person says, stam alosha nazirus, that's the Nazir Shuska Batorov Lo Neder Vafilu Niskaben Linda Per Soisa Masha Belev Anan Piv Beliba Shavim Bina V'chulei V'chulei. So the bottom line is the Marit knocks it down. But there could have been a havamina that Nazir it's not the Nazir Shimshon is a peculiar bird and it's not even a Nazirus. The Brisker Rav takes it in the opposite direction. He says that the Lashon Rambam is mashma that it's not a Nazir Goma means it's a Nazir, but it's not a Nazir Goma. But that's how he sees it. So he says. In the Brisker Rav, so he says the following. He says, Zeu Ika halacha, Nazirus Shimshon sheyesh chalois Nazirus she'ena gemula. V'kevan shekein nimtza degam Nazirus Shimshon kiven shezman chaloisa hi le'olam, harei gam hi b'chlal Nazirus olam. V'hoya be'emes tzarech liyos bahadin demekel b'tal kol yud beis chodesh. Ela dezeu dinei Nazirus Shimshon she'ena megaleach le'olam. V'zeu shekosav Rambam she'enei megaleach k'shar nazir olam kol yud beis chodesh. So the Brisker Rav, I can't say that he has powerful hoichachas from the Rambam, but it's a hergation. He had tremendous hergation. He had a tremendous intuition, a tremendous sensitivity, because he was learning the Rambam his entire life, and from Taten. So Lamaisa, this is what he feels. He feels that when the Rambam says k'shar nazir olam, he's not What's Yahavamina that he should be? So he says because he's a Nazir, and the Nazir Olam is certainly a Nazir, and that's probably why the Rambam starts from the Shloshim Yom, and in this Perek B'davka he puts in Nazir Olam and Nazir Shimshon. He says Tosfos.
Distinction.
When he says the Nizirei Olam, he seems to be dominant to two types. One where you're a Nazir La'olam, and also a Nazir Olam, because he says it uses Lashon plural.
No, I don't think so.
He doesn't say, he just takes the Shad Nazir Olam. He doesn't take the Shad Nazir. He says Shad Nizirei Olam. He seems to be dominant to both of them, and just a Lashon.
The Rambam at the beginning speaks only about Nazir Olam. He doesn't say La'olam. He doesn't say La'olam once.
Why Lashon plural?
I don't know. I don't know if that's a diuk. I don't know. The Brisker doesn't look at anybody else. Just the same plain Nazir Olam. Rambam says the Nazir Olam is from Avshalom, and that's it. And he says Shmuel is also like that. And I don't see that he has another Nazir Olam other than that. And he says that he's like Shah Nizirei Olam, that he would be Mekel B'tar. The Nazir Shimshon is not Mekel B'tar. He just leaves it alone forever. Then he calls Tosfos. Tosfos Kahn means Davdalit. In Nazir Kosfu, the Nazir Shimshon Lesa B'She'ela. If you write Megemol Makis, he writes, "My name is Shamein Raya Kol Kach, Moshe Kasal Rashi Shom, the Nazir Shimshon Lesa B'She'ela, Shum Sha'amalach Yiziroi V'zeh Shayach Rak B'Shimshon Atzmai. Avo B'mi Shematfis Atzmai B'Shimshon Shezeu Kvar Al Yedei Piv, Tzorich L'Hoyol She'ela." So he says, logically, it should be like that. Shimshon himself can't be B'She'ela because the Malach did it, and there's nothing you can undo. But that which is Al Yedei Piv, because he's saying he wants to be a Nazir Shimshon, that l'chayr should be B'She'ela. He says, Amna Mefush L'Kamon, so the Mon Yudalit. The Nazir Shimshon Lesa B'She'ela V'lo Nispayel Hatam Lama. V'Ramam Kosov, Hatam Mishum Shenizirus Shimshon La'olam Hoysa. In Halacha Yudalit, the Rambam says, Umisha Noda Nazir K'Shimshon, Eina Yochel L'Hishoel Al Nidroi, Shenizirus Shimshon La'olam Hoysa.
So why is it impervious to Shalem? Why is
Yeah.
Why is it impervious?
He asks the same question. Ve'enei mavua v'chial nazir olam lo yitoyel she'ela. So the Kesef Mishnah Lechem Mishnah, there's a lot of svarim that talk about this. But he's asking Pashut, if nazir olam has she'ela, Ram didn't say that, but nazir olam there's no she'ela. So then why by him should not be b'she'ela? Because it's lo olam haisa. Yeah, because Tfilah Zois HaChavis Yor b'tshuva the loydami l'nazir olam ayin sham. V'nira the she'ela ma'elas b'chol makom who din kula b'neder sheyoyel she'ela olav. Ubal kochach havi iso neder yeshnoi b'she'ela. V'rak yeshnoi b'she'ela amrinan avalo yeshnoi b'hafara. Mishum the she'ela who din b'neder sheyoyel olav she'ela. V'alkein b'boli yidei gizbo loy mahani she'ela mishum d'lachad osil yidei gizbo shuv ein b'yadin neder sheyoyel b'she'ela. V'zeu ma shekosav Rambam shebenazir Shimshon leka klal hadin sheyoyel she'ela mishum d'nezer Shimshon la'olam hoysa ve'in kavanosei loyma b'zeh hatam ela shekach ne'emra ha'alocha the nazir Shimshon tiyah la'olam v'lo toyel ba'din she'ela. So what the Brisker Rabbi is saying over here is very simple. Sometimes when you say mishum, you mean I'm going to give you a svara why it doesn't work. So he says there's absolutely no svara why it should be like that. He says that's the taich of Nazir Shimshon. That's what he means. Nazir Shimshon is la'olam. So it's very interesting.
It's Nazir Olam.
It says Misha Nada b'Nazir Shimshon Eina Yochel Yishoel Anidroi Shenezirus Shimshon la'olam haisa.
Why do you have to say that?
He's saying, I think he's basically saying as follows. He says, if you want to have Nazir Shimshon, that's the price that you're going to pay, because that's what Nazir Shimshon is. That's how he's teaching the Rambam. So the Rambam isn't telling you that Nazir Shimshon la'olam, and for a neder la'olam you can't have she'ela. He says it's not even true by Nazir olam.
You could have She'ela.
Kal v'chomer, other kinds of things that are la'olam. So this is his. But what's the bottom line? The bottom line, according to the Brisker Rav, is and it's corroborated mistama from the seder of the whole perek and where the perek is and what the perek is about, that basically all these nazirusin are basically dinei nazir. They're dinei nazir with unique halachas, with unique consequences, and therefore, when the Rambam says that eino megaleach kishar nazir olam, he's entitled to say it, because Pashtus, since he's a Nazir Olam, and he's a regular Nazir like that, even though he has peculiar halachas, but Lagabi, that inyan of Taglachas, we would have expected it. If it's La'olam, it should be able to be Megaleh. So he says, no, in that respect, he's different too. If it's an entirely different Nazirus, so the Rambam shouldn't bring it here, B'chlal, should bring it somewhere, who knows, and not connect it dafka to the fact that he happens to be also a Nazir Olam, v'chulei, v'chulei. I just wanted to contrast this with the way I heard from my Rebbe, Rav Soloveitchik, Zechayna Livracha. He says Kemat the exact opposite. It's interesting. But you have to start with a Hakdama. He says, a Rambam writes in the beginning of the first perek of Hilchos Nedarim the following. Haneder nechlak l'shtei machloikos. Hachelek harishon hu sheyes as atzmei b'dvorim hamutarim loy. And that's what the Torah says. Lesa yisal nafshay she'isal atzmei dvorim hamutarim. That's what he asked it. Yesal atzmei dvorim hamutarim. That's the regular neder. Kikar zeh osar alav. V'chelek zeh hu shani koiro isay nidrei isa. The Rambam, whenever he's going to speak about nidrei isa, that's what he means. Hachelek hasheni shechiyav atzmei b'korban she'eino chayav boy. V'azeh nema b'Torah u'nedorecha asher tido b'nidveisecha. You probably know this Rambam already from learning the Dara. Rambam, Perek Aleph Nezirus Halacha Aleph. We're jumping from Hilchos Nedarim to Hilchos Nazir. First Halacha Nezirus. Zelashoina. Nezirus u'neder michlal nidrei yisel. Yotzei mefurash shenezirus michlal nidrei yisel v'loi michlal nidrei hekdesh. So that's what he says. The Rambam says beferish at the very beginning of Hilchos Nazir. Remember, I told you that there are two kinds of Nedarim. There's Nidrei Yisur and Nidrei Hekdesh. You should know that Nazirus has consequences of Karbanos v'chulei v'chulei. It's Nidrei Yisur. Yeah. Rambam in the 6th perek of Hilchos Erech and Halacha Gimel explains the Gemara le'apotim in oilam ad she'hi Nazir. It's a neder b'kum v'aseh. Rambam says like this. He didn't make himself a Nazir. He didn't say, I want to be a Nazir. He said, I will put him in oilam ad she'eh b'Nazir. Zok the Rambam, chayav linhoig b'Nazirus, v'afal pishadayin loy nada b'Nazir, hoyel v'amar she'yido b'Nazir, chayav lihi Nazir. And this l'chayr is a very big problem, this Rambam. You know why? Because in Nidrei Yisur there's no kum v'aseh. In Hekdesh there's kum v'aseh. I'm mischayiv myself to bring a korban. But I'm mischayiv myself to bring a korban. If Nazirus would be a Nidrei Hekdesh, he could say, I'm mischayiv myself to become a Nazir. Everything is fine and good. So if he's mischayiv himself to make himself a Nazir, so that's like mischayiv himself to bring an oila. But if Nidrei Yisur, that's all Nazirus is, so how can I say that I'm mischayiv myself to take a neder isa? What if a person would say, I'm mischayiv myself to asa the kicker tomorrow? So what given a neder? The only way you could do that is making a shvur maybe, but you certainly can't make a neder. So if the kasha is poshet, if Nazirus is nidrei isa, how could you be mischayiv yourself to make a neder isa? That's the kasha.
Why you have a Torah? You have a Torah.
No. We're talking about in the lomdus of it. You can't make a kum v'aseh neder. Well, so he says, that's this kasha. In that the Nazirus mahava nidrei yisur v'loy nidrei hekdesh hey chal b'kum v'aseh. And then he says another thing. The Rambam compares the din of loy apotim in oilam ad she'ei nazir to din lahakdish alosis litzdaka davar shloy bali oilam. Right? Matish davar shloy bali. The Rambam paskin in perek chav beis of Hilchos Mechira shekinyan v'shibudim chalim kedin nidrei hekdesh. V'im keimuchas shesoiva, says the Rav, she'nazirus nami nidrei hekdesh. L'chayra, that's a stira to what he said at the beginning, that it's nidrei isur. So he says, of course, what's he going to say? Two dinim. There's two dinim in Nazirus. Aliba de Ramam yeshnei dinim in Nazirus. Nidre Yisur and Nidre Hektish. Neder Nazirus chal bekum v'asei kedin Nidre Hektish. But by Nazirus there's also Nidre Yisur. So he asks, what's the pshat? What's the biur hadover? So he says, Nitan loymar. This is where we start getting close to Nazirus Shimshon. Nitan loymar. He says the svaras hadover is as follows. Shebechalois haneder mahava Nazirus nidgei gavoya. Sharei yesh ben Nazirus kiyumei mitzvus l'gavoya k'moi behektish. The kedusha of the seyar, the taglachas, karbonos. V'gom amaisa neder mahava Nazirus nidgei yisur. Hadin shel ein neder chal v'kum v'asei toli b'chalois haneder. He says that the reason that we are allowed to make these two dinim is because we're talking about two separate things. We're talking about the question of making the neder, the haflas haneder, and we're talking about the chalois of the neder. He says the maisa neder is nidre yisur. The din that ein neder chal bekum v'asei toli b'chalois haneder. Neder gavoya chal bekum v'asei v'ilu neder yisur chal b'sheva al taisa. V'kevon shechalois nezirus mahava neder gavoya, neder ha-nezirus chal bekum v'asei. Ulam b'maisa neder yesh nezirus dinim shel nidre yisur. A raya sheyesh hatfasa b'nidre nezirus. Hatfasa din b'nidre yisur v'loin b'nidre gavoya. V'noisef lozeh, adinu sha'nozir min hayayin hu nozir lakoil. V'alo yhab b'maisa neder hazeh, eino mekabel alatzmai kiyum in nezirus k'moi kedusha seyo taglachas karbonos. And lo ydotzlam la'os alatzmai yayin v'nidroi eino rak neder yisur b'lvad. Im kol zeh me'achar shemaisa neder chal k'neder yisur, chol ha-nezirus, gam legabe kiyumei ha-nezirus. So he says that this chiluk, this nekuda, is going to be very helpful. And this is what it helps us. He writes like this: Nafkamina tiyeh legabe nozer shimshon. Hine b'shar nezirus yesh mitzvos melois yomim taglachas karbonos hamahaves kiyum gavoya de nezirus. Ulam b'nozer shimshon ein boi melois yomim, einoi misgaleach ve'einoi mevi karbonos. Hachalois shel nezirus shimshon eino ela Eino shel kiyum nezirus, v'kiyum gavoya kehekdesh, el chalois shel isurei nozir bilvad. Says a tremendous chiddush. He wants to say that since in every nezirus you are basically doing two things, you are creating a hafloas nozir, and then there are the consequences of the nezirus, which, although it began with nidre yisur, evolves into nidre hekdesh. So if a person has those consequences in his Nazirus, then he has a Nazirus of Hektish. But if he doesn't evolve into those consequences of Nazirus, then he remains with Nidre Yisur Bilvad. Legabe Nazirus Shimshon Kayam Adin Shel Neder Yisur Bilchud, Vilu B'shar Nazirus Yesh Din Shel Nidre Yisur V'gam Nidre Hektish. V'yoytze Lefi Zeh, Sha'anoider Lo Yepoter Min Ha'olam Ad She'ehei Nozer Shimshon. What if a person would say, Lo yepoter min ha'olam, the Rav Soloveitchik from Boston, the Rav, he says that there's a real halacha l'maisa consequence in my shtickle Torah, which is unusual. He says, what's the halacha l'maisa nafkamina? He says, what was our whole hezber, Lo yepoter min ha'olam ad she'eda b'nozir, why he's mechuyev to do the nazirus? Because the nazirus is like hekdesh. And the same way that he says, that it should be chayiv a carbon. What if he says where there are no such consequences? There's no taglachas, there's no tushaseh, there's no karbonos. So what's the halacha?
Wouldn't be chal.
So he says it wouldn't be chal. He writes, "V'yoytze lefi zeh sha'anoida lo yepoter min ha'olam ad she'ei nozer shimshon, einoi b'chlal nidgei gavoya ve'ein bo yisur bal ta'acher, sharei lefi omo yef shel lindo nidgei yisur b'kum v'asei." So he says, and that's the chiluk, mamish dovavi fucha of the Briskerov. That's the chiluk between Nazir Shimshon and Nazir Olam. He says Nazir Olam, brings Kabbanis.
It's like the Marit, huh?
Lumas.
The Shimshon is like the Marit.
It's in a way like the Marit, except, he's saying it's a Nazirus. I mean, it's called Nazirus, but it's a peculiar Nazirus. And that's a Chalois Neder. Yes, that's right.
That's what it's
Lumas Nazir Shimshon din Nazir Olam Shemevi Kabbanis Nazir Kol Yud Beis Chodesh Umekel Betar. After he cuts his hair, he's required to bring those 3 Kabbanis. And then he continues weiter. V'nira bebir dinoi, sh'Hashem shel Nazir chal begavra zel le'olam. Amnon Nazir olam mekayim mitzvah sfiras malois yimei nezirus kol yud beis chodesh, which is also a chiddush. He's going to be a Nazir forever, but since he has to cut his hair, and since he has to bring kabbanis after he cuts his hair, and then he starts all over again, it's keilu a cycle that repeats itself kol yud beis chodesh forever, which is interesting. L'chein miskalech shemevi kabbanis kol yud beis chodesh v'kiyum mitzvah malois yimei nezirus. Rosh lenazir mevur she'im ein aroitzel l'shtamish bekula dich mitzaroi mekel betar ein tzorch lavi kabbanis yud beis chodesh. Right? And he says, V'nira she'yevsher she'soiver she'kula ba'alma hu she'yochel l'skalech pam yud beis chodesh im rotza. Sharei lo matzinu shum mokim she'kabbanis hanazir boim rak kadei lahata yisrael en nezirus. Ika kiyam mitzvahs ha-kabbanis ha-kiyam b'mitzvahs malois ha-yomim shel ha-nezirus v'achei kiyam ha-malois pok ha-nezirus v'yisurim hutru v'tzichim loima af l'das ha-rosh she'bedoima l'kachu adin shel nazir olam ela she'rosh seiva she'ein b'nazir olam choiva l'sayim mitzvahs ha-malois. So he's trying to fit in the Rosh with his Torah as well. The Rosh says that you can volunteer, to be cut your hair, but you're not mechuyev to cut your hair. If you don't cut your hair, then you don't bring kabbanis. So it's a letter getting complicated. So he tries to fit that in. We don't really have time to be masbirid. But Lamaisa, you see a very fascinating thing. The Rav here doesn't bring the whole shaklavataria of the Lishonis of the Rambam and why it's in that Perek and why the Rambam says it's not like Nazir Olam. And he'll taka learn that it's not like Nazir Olam because it's not Nazir Olam at all. These are dakas dika Lishonis that is very, very hard to be kaiveya. I just want to point out very much bekitzer the way the Reb Chatzkel Abramsky, the way he talks about this. Yeah. Other Shimshon mitami lemeisim. Shimshon atzmai tima lemeisim. This is a lotion of the Tzefta. They quotes the Rambam, Shimshon lo haya nazir gomer v'chulei v'chulei. Mishanada nazir Shimshon eni yochel yishal anidloi, etc. Lotion Aramich is Naziris per Gimel Ach Yud Gimel Aloch Yudalet. Hine yesh shnei sugei Nazirus. Sug echad shel Nazirus haksuva b'Torah ha'Iseres b'yayim b'taglachas l'tami l'meisim. V'sug sheni Nazirus shel halocha shenemra l'Moshe miSinai asher al piyah hanazir also b'yayim b'taglachas levad. L'shoina Yerushalmi b'Mechiltin Perek Aleph Seif Halacha Beis Es sheNazirus ha'Torah Yotza Nazirus Shimshon she'eino Torah. Doesn't mean that it's midrabanan. It means it's not mefurish b'Torah and it's halacha l'Moshe miSinai. U'miyayim shenemra halacha zu mi shenada b'Nazirus haksuva b'Torah hu also b'shloisha dvarim. U'mi shenada b'Nazirus shenemra halacha l'Moshe miSinai haya also rak b'yayinu b'taglachas. That's what he writes. L'choy mashma miloshen Rambam sheNazirus Shimshon l'olam ha'isa lo'ikosav sheShimshon nazir olam haya shedinhu b'Nazirus Shimshon shehi Nazirus l'olam. V'chei mashma l'choy miloshen hakosav alo yamalach amar la'isha k'nazir l'kim yeh min anar min aboten v'lo isha ba'amra el isha to her husband as seen on Nazirus stam sheshama b'yamalach estivam k'nazir l'kim yeh anar min aboten ad yoyim moisai. Ve'ilu b'noida stam b'Nazirus haksuva b'Torah eina nazir el shoshim yoyim. V'hainu mishum she'ein nezirus klal b'pachas mishloshim yoyim, oy gemara gmiri loy mitam omer b'Yerushalmi. Gadol pera sa'roisha, and pera is only shloshim yoyim. But either way, because that's what Nazirus is. He says, "Avo b'noida b'Nazirus shenemra halacha l'Moshe misina afilu hu noida l'zman la'eser shonim harei ze nazir olam shekach hoisa halacha b'noida sug Nazirus zu shechaylo olav haNazirus b'gzeiras halacha li'olam afu pi shehu lo noda b'Nazirus la'olam v'kevan shechalois haNazirus hu b'gzeiras halacha. This is what we had before. This is the So he has the Lemaisa, these two sugim, and he quotes the same thing again, and he quotes the Sfarim that quote the Brisker Rav, Chidush Reb Shmuel on Nazir, and also he says it in Nedarim, and he says it in Makis. This is the Shaila. This is the Chakira. Is this a Sug Nazir like all the Nazirisin, and they all have their own unique halachas, or is it different? The Brisker Rav is noita that it is basically a Sug of Nazirus, and he brings that the connection to Nazir Olam is because it's one and the same, it just has different halachas. Soloveitchik from Boston, so he says the exact opposite. He says that they're radically different. A Nazir Olam is taka regular Sug Nazirus, which Sugei Nazirus have two dinim all the time. It's Sai Nidrei Isur in the Haflah Shabai and Sai Nidrei Hekdesh in the Chaloi Shabai, and that's why in regular Nazirus, including Nazirus Olam, he would be able to say Lo Yapatim in Olam, unless I became such a Nazir, would be Chal, the Chiyuv to make himself such a Nazir. Masha'en Kain, and this is a tremendous Chiddush, that when it comes to Nazir Shimshon, he's going to say not like that. Because Nazir Shimshon is just a plain Nidrei Yisur, which is a very, very big Chiddush, because it doesn't have any of the Chalois Hekdesh that you have in a regular Nazirus. There's no Taglachas, there's no Karbonos, and in any case, therefore, if you say Lo Yapatim in Olam Ad She'eya Nazir Shimshon, it would not be mechayev him at all, because that's a neder l'kan l'abba. Very, very interesting. I just wanted to be Messiah with very, it's not exactly a Freila Chazak, but it's a very interesting thing. And then, of course, the Marit, by the way, you know, he has a very beautiful tshuva, which you should look into, Chelek Aleph Siman Daled, where the Marit was asked the question, what about Hafara? Can the Baal be Mefer? And he goes through it very, very, very geshmak. I wanted to read to you a Maisa Shahaya. There's a Peladika Maisa. This is a tshuva that was written by the Minchas Yitzchak, Chelek Ches Siman Pei, and the Shoyel, this is from the year Tov Shin Mem Aleph, not so long ago. He writes, the Shoyel writes as follows. This Shoyel is about tshuva. He says, Toida lekel achat kufa arucha shel tehiyah u te'iyah keravni amok misbar shmuel avodosa b'kiyum Torah mitzvahs ze kishona sheniskarafti lebreslov v'yosi b'Bombay Hodu achat tiltulim rabim shel kama shonim bein oivdei avodazora shoinim u'mishunim Rachmana litzlan higati lebeis knesses erev Rosh Hashanah Tavshin Lamed Vav. And it's Pilei Ployim, Kishishamati es hapiyut, Oikeid v'hanekad v'amizbeach, Poratzti b'bchi rav v'oz echlatati, she'ein li mokam acher ki'im b'yahadus. It's the whole thing is a pellet. A person hears a piyut. You know a person heard of darshan, a magid, a place, I don't know, he went to a gadol, Chafetz Chaim held his hand and some tears fell, and he's become a Sheiber Shabbos. This fellow hears a piyut. Pilei Ployim. Paratzti b'bchira v'os echlatati she'ein li mokam acher ki'im b'yahadus. Lamrois shelo yholol li musag ma ze yahadus. Could you imagine? Where is this person coming from? From the moon. Lo yholol li musag ma ze yahadus. V'samti pa'amai lovoi la'atzeinu ha'kedosha. B'pashat Lech Lecha Yigati Le'eretz Yisrael v'alachti lebeis Horai b'Tel Aviv. He's born and bred. It's Pilei Ployim. He ends up in Bombay with all of this. It's no revolution. ושם למדתי בעצמי חומש ונח. עוד לא הלכתי לבייס כנסת וגם תפילין עוד לא הנחתי. ובייס תקופת ישיבוסי בבייס הוריי, who are obviously not שייך, קיבלתי על עצמי נזירוס בהשפועס דרכי עבודה זרה הוידיים בדרך להסקדשוס. You see the oil of a choshech that's mishamish in this person is the chnoir v'oyen. I mean, you couldn't make this up. Balag v'oyma nasati l'meiroi l'chmal l'tzlon. Nasati l'meiroi Rab Shimon Yechoyu bikati b'kol ha'kvoros misoviv v'lo nizhalti al tumas meisim michoysa yeda. Gam nichshalti b'achilas taroivis yerokos im tzimukim. He made himself a nazir, and he doesn't know the halachas. He's metamel ameisim, he eats raisins. B'chag HaShavuos higati lahar Tzion, v'schabarti shomim chaburas anoshim, shekofru b'toira shebal peh, v'eminu rak b'zoyar. B'toira shebechsav. The zoyar and the Torah shebechsav. That's some shutfus. V'chipsu ligor l'sam Yisrael al yidei hakomas shevet Meshichi. V'oz kaninu b'chavron shnei chamorim levadim, ubanu aleim liYerushalayim. They all fit on 2 donkeys. It's not such a big group these days. Uvisham halachti im achamor lahorim to the mountains vivos Yerushalayim. Levishosi hoya saprua ma'oid. My malbush was reflective of what was going on with my life. Talis cotton mechnasayim rechovim v'kafkafim bilvad. Umidei pam yisibol ha'koisel lahar Tzion. Oz ba'oset kufas yeshivosi behorim. Kishekoyre yisi b'toyre v'nach bo bedaiti lekabel nezirus Shimshon. So the nezirus that he started out with, that wasn't enough. Now he's on a higher madrega. It requires something a little bit more extreme. Eini zoiche bim hoitzeisi zois b'sfosai. He doesn't remember if he said it beferish. Be'erev Rosh Hashanah Eitav Shalom Zayim chazarti la'artziyin lo'isa chabura v'osu shom ha'toras nedorim. They believe in the Zohar and in the Torah, but they're making our Torahs Nedarim. It's Torahs Nedarim. Bal Yachal V'acherim Moichalim.
Say Chutz Neder Shimshon.
Yeah. So Flatbush Neder V'ayim. Then he writes, Lefi Asidu Ozmil Malti La'atzmi Toich Amiras Hanusa Chutz Min Nezirus Shimshon. B'meshech Hazman Noitzlu Gushim B'Saroisai. He had these lumps in his hair. They had started to get a little bit out of the hand. So it's tamil amesim. He eats simukim, and now he's plucking his hair. Poshut shebematzavi hayoim lo hayisi mekabel alai shum nezirus advarim mishunim. Ve'yosh hanezirus machbido alai bebechina gashmis v'ruchanis v'chavrosis v'gam anidoyik shlo ya'akev al yedei zeh as yelodai mechinuch hamekubel became a total normal Baal Tshuva. But now he has this Nzirus Shimshon on his head, Tarte Mashma, and the Maisa. What should he do? Right? Al kein areni shaiteach es bakoshosi lifnei kvoid ma'alaschim shetalichuni b'derech emes v'anochim u'schochim min hashamayim meruba ad kan l'shoin hashayel. In the course of the Tshuva, the Minchas Yitzchok writes, amongst the various Tzdodim Lahatir, he says he used to go to the mikveh and he used to undo his hair and everybody in the mikveh ran away. So he's babayit to the kedusha of all those people, and he ran away also. He says, it's a babish unbelievable. So in the end, Umaisa, he finds Stotim Lahatir Mekanu Lekan.
What's the shayla? The guy's a moor.
He says. No, he became a total Baal Tshuva, a very normal person.
When he was Makabel?
When he was Makabel, yeah. So there's a lot of things here. He has...
So why is a woman?
Why can't we make it dance?
Maybe he was ill.
It's an interesting tshuva. That's mitzad. I mean, the tshuva is interesting stam, but the Maisa Shahay is an unbelievable Maisa. By the way, Nzirus Shimshon created trouble for a lot of very choshev people also. In Mitzrayim, at the very end of the... I mean, does this satisfy the Chelik Parsha or whatever? There's a very, very fascinating series of tshuvas. Everybody got involved. A lot of these tshuvas are still b'ksav yad. But there's a Choshev Yid in Bnei Brak that wrote a ganze maimer on these inyonim from those tshuvas. He went and did a tremendous amount of research, really a big effort to find these tshuvas and get copies of them from the different libraries and whatever. But what happened was that the last manig of the Agudah in Mitzrayim was around the time of the Maribei Rav and the Radvaz and the others. You know, this is just pashut in the Tkufa in Mitzrayim that is parallel to the Tkufa right before the Ari HaKodesh and so on and so forth. So it's a very long time ago. So what happened was that the Ottoman Turks conquered, and they made a gzeira that they can't have their own autonomy. But during that time, exactly in that Tkufa, the last one of the manhigim of Mitzrayim, so he wanted to appoint a certain individual, and B'davka not appoint another individual to be his mamali makom. And what happened was that in order to guarantee that that they won't be able to force him and push him to appoint this particular individual, he said he'll be a Nazir Shimshon if this individual is appointed. Now nobody wants that he should become a Nazir Shimshon, so Memela, that was, so there's a whole alalei shuvas about whether there was, if he would have appointed him, would it have been chal and this and that, and there's a ganze marocha, big discussions about Nazir Shimshon and all of those shuvas. Some of them are by the Ma'arid, and just a very interesting, the Radvaz was writing a big tshuva about it, and the Maribei Rav, and all these famous people that are in the time of the Kesef Mishnah and the others. And the Bichlal, this Naziris Shimshon plays a role in a number of other tshuvas like that. A lot of interesting stories. But this story, this is a peladik gezach. You see at Heichen Advarim Magiyim, how a person could be sedreit and verkrummt. This is not an appeal. We're building a shul in a place called Carmel. How I got involved in it is an andere Sach, but the shul is being built, it's happening. What is Carmel? Did any of you hear of Carmel? Mistom Carmel is a city of 45,000 Yidden in the lower Galil. It's not that far, Mistom 20 minutes by car from Meron. And Lamaisa, this Carmel has a very choshev Rav Margalit, with a very big center in one part of Carmel, but the rest of Carmel, the Midbar. I would say 50% Sfardim and 50% Russians. And you understand what a midbar is and how it's even shaykh that a person should live in Eretz Yisrael and not have any shaykhs, zero. And basically the whole culture that comes from America, today everything comes from America. The ganze culture, the entertainment and the value system and the sense of just ani. And I have the privileges and the rights to do whatever I want, and no one can stop me unless I'm hurting somebody else. The whole hashkafas olam, which is dova v'yifucha of the Torah in Eretz Yisrael, and mamish people that's it. That's their lifestyle. So this particular Rav, his name is Goldberg, Osher Goldberg. So he planted himself in the middle of a midbar, and around him is apartment house after apartment house with these chevra. The first time he moved in, his neighbor said, "Parasite, go home." Parasite, go home. Anyhow, now he's a Baal Tshuva, this fellow. And there's a whole bunch of them. So he started in his house, and then Yom Kippur he was looking for a minyan of people. They weren't Shomer Shabbos, but he was looking for a minyan. And then he made a storefront, and enlarged the storefront. Without a center, there's not shaykh. But to have an havana of such people, like we live in our Dalet Amas, but the rest of the country, no shaykhs. They say that the Rav Shach, could not eat breakfast. He says, how can I eat breakfast when I know that there's so many Yiddish kinderlach that never say Shema Yisrael? It's like that's also the Orva Chayshach. But you see a story about such a person, you say, that can't be, it's not even shaykh. Guy grows up in Eretz Yisrael. Shaykh v'shaykh. So Hareini knows a Shimshon, he says. He doesn't know. Pillay ploy. Anyhow, he found a heter for him, and he became a Baal Tshuva, and he's very... That's, by the way, you have to understand the greatness of an Uri Zoya and what he accomplished. But a person would have thought that after Uri Zoya, it's a different world. Everybody's going to change. Doesn't work like that. Yeah. Gam ki esha b'choshech Hashem or li. There's the or li for people, but he's still yesha b'choshech. So for a lot of people that don't have the Hashem or li, they sit b'choshech. So he was mashpi on a lot of people, and he was mechazik a lot of Bali Tshuva. But you see a person like that, a famous actor, the most famous actor in Eretz Yisrael, you'd think that everybody would change. Even his best friends, they couldn't change. They couldn't change. It was impossible for them to just... It's a different world. So we have to be mispalel. We have to be mispalel in all our tefillas for the Gula Shleima b'mehera v'yameinu amen.
It's a shame.